Hey everybody,
Fatbird Finds here.
I'm Mary Beth.
And I'm Laura.
Welcome, Laura.
Hey, it's late night.
It is. We've been at this all day.
It's late night for a podcast.
It is. So this is Saturday, November 5th, and we started off today with a sale this morning. Well, this afternoon.
Yes.
With Misty on her channel.
The Christmas bash.
And that's been going on all day, which is super exciting.
Uh-huh.
And now we're finishing off the night with a podcast. So those of you who have been listening to sales all day and participating, now you can just sit back, relax, grab yourself a nice cup of tea or something and listen to the fine words of Mary Shelley being read.
And maybe most likely fall asleep.
Yes. And if you've already gone to sleep from all of the sales, you can listen to this Sunday morning.
That's right.
Okay.
If we do have anybody joining us live, feel free to throw out some comments and we'll look at them as we go and see what we can answer for you.
Yes. Okay. So when we left off, our creature, so Victor has met the creature like out in the wilderness.
Uh-huh.
Victor has gone off on this like retreat of self-renewal or something.
Right.
He's the worst.
Oh, he's the worst.
Yeah. So, but anyway, he found the creature, right?
Right.
So, and now the creature is like, look, let me tell you, you're going to listen to me. You're going to listen to my story. Right?
Yes.
So that's where we are. So we've already heard a small bit.
Yeah, he's like, you made me, so now you're going to have to deal with this.
If you made me, you're going to have to listen to what I've been going through all these years. It's been like 2 years.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we know so far is that the creature has like been amazed at like the phases of the moon. He's been observing things. He's been learning things.
Yeah, we've gone back in time and he's telling what happened from day one with him.
Right.
Yeah.
So the last I think we've heard is that he's in a shack. So he's come up on this shack in the woods and he's sort of living in the pigsty that adjoins the house. Mm-hmm. And he's like creeping on the people who live there.
Yes.
Essentially.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's where we are. If you've not heard any of the story up until now, that's okay. You can listen, go back and listen to the rest later. We're just really glad that you're here.
We're glad that you're here and you'll have fun because we have to stop and comment like every 2 seconds because we can't believe what a crazy jerk that Victor is.
Yes.
And all what's happening.
Correct.
And I did want to say one thing. I apologize. I don't remember who commented, but someone commented and let us know that the inset poem that we read in the text of the last reading, it wasn't attributed to anyone in the book, but someone said that was a Percy Shelley poem.
Oh.
Who the author was married to at the time. So I thought that was cool.
That is very interesting. I love it.
Hi,
Feel free to...
Let me say a couple of hellos.
Yes. Hello
Hello,
to everybody.
welcome in. There's one of our selling buddies. I name her Amy.
Yeah. So feel free to, just sit back and relax. If you want to throw us a comment, we will try to read those. But, here we go.
Here we go.
Are you excited? Okay, we're still from the monster's perspective.
And it is chapter 12.
Chapter 12. And this is from the monster's perspective. I lay on my straw, but I could not sleep. I thought of the occurrences of the day. What chiefly struck me was the gentle manners of these people, and I longed to join them, but I dare not. I remembered too well the treatment I had suffered the night before from the barbarous villagers, and resolved whatever course of conduct I might hereafter think is right to pursue, for that the present I would remain quietly in my hovel, watching and endeavoring to discover the motives which influenced their actions.
I think that's a good plan.
So, yeah.
There's no telling how he's going to be treated.
He's just like, I really want to join you guys, but, I think I'll just stay here. I don't want to, I don't want to go through that again.
Right.
The cottagers arose the next morning before the sun. The young woman arranged the cottage and prepared the food, and the youth departed after the first meal. This day was passed in the same routine as that which preceded it. The young man was constantly employed out of doors, and the young girl in various laborious occupations within. The old man, whom I soon perceived to be blind, employed his leisure hours on his instrument or in contemplation. Nothing.
Oh, yes. They were like playing and singing. He was entranced to hear music.
He's mesmerized by music. Nothing could exceed the love and respect which the younger cottagers exhibited toward their companion. They performed toward him every little office of affection and duty with gentleness, and
Greg's loving the cottagers.
and he rewarded them by his benevolent smiles. So if you hear the word benevolent, or if you hear the word countenance, you should take a drink, because Mary Shelley loves those words.
Those are her favorite words. That's the drinking game. I don't think that we included benevolent, but I think we should.
I think we have to include benevolent. They were not entirely happy. Oh, did you sell something on eBay?
I think I did.
They were not entirely happy. The young man and his companion often went apart and appeared to weep. I saw no cause for their unhappiness, but I was deeply affected by it. If such lovely creatures were miserable, it was less strange that I, an imperfect and solitary being, should be wretched. Yet why were these gentle beings unhappy? They possessed a delightful house, for such it was in my eyes, and every luxury. They had a fire to warm them when chill, and delicious foods when hungry. They were dressed in excellent clothes, and still more they enjoyed one another's company and speech, interchanging each day looks of affection and kindness. What did their tears imply? Did they really express pain? I was first unable to solve these questions, but perpetual attention and time explained to me many appearances which were at first enigmatic. So he's just like, why are they so sad? It makes you like look on at your life, you know, like, what do we have to be upset about? We have everything we need.
Right.
Yeah.
It's deep.
A considerable period elapsed before I discovered one of the causes of the uneasiness of this amiable family. It was poverty, and they suffered that evil in a very distressing degree. Their nourishment consisted entirely of the vegetables in their garden and the milk of one cow, which gave very little during the winter, when its masters could scarcely procure food to support it. They often, I believe, suffered the pangs of hunger very poignantly, especially the two younger cottagers. For several times they placed food before the old man when they reserved none for themselves. This trait of kindness moved me sensibly. I had been accustomed during the night to steal a part of their store for my own consumption, but when I found out in doing this I inflicted pain on the cottagers, I abstained, and satisfied myself with berries, nuts, and roots, which I gathered from a neighboring wood.
That doesn't sound much like a monster.
It gives me like goosebumps. I seriously got goosebumps because he's so sweet. He's so nice. He's like, I was stealing their food, and then I realized that they can't afford for me to do this, so I stopped.
He doesn't even really know what stealing is.
I can't stand it.
Of course, you have to go with it. You have to go with the fact that he, his brain did have some knowledge before. He's just trying to feel it all out, and
yeah,
you just kind of have to go with what he knows and what he doesn't know. But
Lord,
yeah,
bless his heart.
Bless his heart. That's what we say in Kentucky. Bless his heart. Well, you can see now, though, why there's a big debate amongst, if you, like, before we read this, I listened to some podcasts and, read some stuff. And when they teach this in high school, it's a big dilemma. A lot of times the teachers will not call Frankenstein's monster a monster until towards the end of the book. They say the creature or it or... because there's a moral issue of how moral the monster was and how moral Victor was, for Pete's sake.
Victor's the worst. I discovered also other means through which I was enabled to assist their labors. I found that the youth spent a great part of each day in collecting wood for the family fire, and during the night I often took his tools, the use of which I quickly discovered, and brought home firing sufficient for the consumption of several days. So he's chopping wood for them.
Oh, that is so nice.
I need him to come over.
I know. Yes, Angela, we're feeling better. Thanks for asking.
I remember the first time that I did this. The young woman, when she opened the door in the morning, appeared greatly astonished on seeing a great pile of wood on the outside. She uttered some words in a loud voice, and the youth joined her, who also expressed surprise. I observed with pleasure that he did not go to the forest that day, but spent it in repairing the cottage and cultivating the garden. By degrees, I made a discovery of a still greater moment. I found that these people possessed a method of communicating their experience and feelings to one another by articulate sounds. I perceived that the words they spoke sometimes produced pleasure or pain, smiles or sadness, in the minds and countenances of their hearers. This was indeed a godlike science, and I ardently desired to become acquainted with it. But I was baffled in every attempt I made for this purpose. Their pronunciation was quick, and the words they uttered, not having any apparent connection with visible objects, I was unable to discover any clue by which I could unravel the mystery of their reference. But by great application, however, and after having remained during the space of several resolutions of the moon in my hovel, I discovered the names that were given to some of the most familiar objects of discourse. I learned and applied the words fire, milk, bread, and wood. I also learned the names of the cottagers themselves. The youth and his companion had each of them several names, but the old man only had one, which was father. The girl was called sister or Agatha, and the youth Felix, brother or son. I cannot describe the delight I felt when I learned the ideas appropriated to each of these sounds and was able to pronounce them.
Oh my God.
I distinguished several other words without being able as yet to understand or apply them, such as good, dearest, unhappy.
Wow.
I can't take it.
You're too tenderhearted for this part of the story.
I'm too emotional for this.
Yeah,
book.
I mean, you can tell. I think you can tell a woman wrote the book.
Oh yeah,
Don't you think?
absolutely. No offense to my men out there who are watching and joining us, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I spent the winter in this manner. The gentle manners and beauty of the cottagers greatly endeared them to me. When they were unhappy, I felt depressed. When they rejoiced, I sympathized with their joys. I saw few human beings besides them, and if any other happened to enter the cottage, their harsh manners and rude gait only enhanced to me the superior accomplishments of my friends. The old man, I could perceive, often endeavored to encourage his children, as sometimes I found that he called them, to cast off their melancholy. He would talk in a cheerful accent, with an expression of goodness that bestowed pleasure even upon me. Agatha listened with respect, her eyes sometimes filled with tears, which she endeavored to wipe away unperceived.
Delbert says, this monster's well spoken.
Right?
I mean, yeah, Delbert, you probably missed the last episode where they had this big altercation when they ran into each other in the wilderness, and he was very well spoken.
Very. We were
in
shocked.
that one. We were shocked.
But I generally found that her
And
countenance...
Greg said, my friends. Oh.
Right, Greg?
Oh, a countenance. Everybody drink.
Now I've lost my place. But I generally found that her countenance and tone were more cheerful after having listened to the exhortations of her father. Exhortations of her father. It was not thus with Felix. He was always the saddest of the group. And even to my unpracticed senses, he appeared to have suffered more deeply than his friends. But if his countenance was more sorrowful, his voice was more cheerful than that of his sister, especially when he addressed the old man. I could mention innumerable instances which, although slight, marked the dispositions of these amiable cottagers. In the midst of poverty and want, Felix carried with pleasure to his sister the first little white flower that peeped out from beneath the snowy ground. Early in the morning, before she had risen, he cleared away the snow that obstructed her path to the milk house, drew water from the well, and brought the wood from the outhouse, where, to his perpetual astonishment, he found his store always replenished by an invisible hand.
Oh my gosh, Mary Beth, he's helping him.
In the day...
Is Felix little?
I think so. In the day, I believe he worked sometimes for a neighboring farmer, because he often went forth and did not return until dinner, yet brought no wood with him. At other times he worked in the garden, but as there was little to do in the frosty season, he read to the old man and Agatha.
Okay, hold up. We've got Carrie that's joining us, and she's crying because she did not get a notification that
Carrie,
we started.
We've been on 15 minutes.
We really kind of just started because, had to do the introductions and all that kind of stuff. We tried to post ahead of time, but we didn't know what time the sales were going to end.
We didn't. So we were just sort of waiting for Sarah and that bunch to finish before we went on.
So let's catch Carrie up really quick.
Sure.
So all you have to remember is last time when we left off, it was from the creature's perspective, and he was in this little village in a pigsty next to this people's house, and he's just taken up from there, and now he's like breaking Mary Beth's heart because he's so sweet.
He's essentially just like watching them and helping them. So like during the night he'll go chop wood, and he's just doing all these like random chores, like these good deeds. And and the people don't know who's doing it, but he's doing it.
Yeah, and he's the one doing it.
I can't stand it.
And he's learned words, so like he knows their names.
Yeah. So that's what you've missed.
All these people didn't get notifications. I'm so sorry. I know. See, we have to plan ahead a little bit more than what we are.
We'll do better in future. This reading had puzzled me extremely at first, but by degrees I discovered that he uttered many of the same sounds when he read as when he talked. I conjectured, therefore, that he found on the paper signs for speech which he understood, and I ardently longed to comprehend these also. But how was that possible when I did not even understand the sounds for which they stood as signs? I improved, however, sensibly in this science, but not sufficiently to follow up any kind of conversation, although I applied my whole mind to the endeavor. For I easily perceived that although I eagerly longed to discover myself to the cottagers, I ought not make the attempt until I had first become master of their language, which knowledge might enable me to make them overlook the deformity of my figure. For with this also the contrast perpetually presented to my eyes had made me acquainted. So, guys, he's just like, man, I really want to talk to these people, but maybe if I just learn a little bit more, maybe if I can just like learn their language a little bit, they're going to look past the way I look.
Yeah, Delbert says, Carrie, this monster is thoughtful and a gentleman. It's really getting
Mary
Mary Beth.
He's such a gentleman. Oh, my God.
Carrie says he could be your house butler.
Yes. I just want to adopt him.
I know.
I want to take care of him. I had admired the perfect forms of my cottagers, their grace, beauty, and delicate complexions. But how was I terrified when I viewed myself in a transparent pool? So he's looking at himself and he's like, yikes. Mm-hmm. At first, I started back, unable to believe that it was indeed I who was reflected in the mirror. And when I became fully convinced that I was in reality the monster that I am, I was filled with the bitterest sensation of despondence and mortification.
Oh, dear.
Alas, I did not yet entirely know the fatal effects of this miserable deformity.
So there's the perfect use of the word alas. You know
Alas.
how sometimes you don't use alas correctly.
Thanks, Laura.
That's perfect.
Thanks so much. As the sun became warmer and the light of day longer, the snow vanished, and I beheld the bare trees and the black earth. From this time Felix was more employed, and the heart-moving indications of impending famine disappeared. Their food, as I afterwards found, was coarse, but it was wholesome, and they procured a sufficiency of it.
Oh, they're doing better.
They're doing better. Several new kinds of plants sprang up in the garden, which they dressed, and these signs of comfort increased daily as the season advanced.
All right, they're doing better.
The old man, leaning on his son, walked each day at noon, when it did not rain, as I found it was called, when the heavens poured forth its water. When the heavens poured forth its water.
It's very romantic.
Stop it. Stop it. This frequently took place, but a high wind quickly dried the earth, and the season became far more pleasant than it had been. My mode of life in my hovel was uniform. During the morning, I attended the motions of the cottagers, and when they were dispersed in various occupations, I slept. The remainder of the day was spent in observing my friends. My friends.
Carrie says he's a poet and didn't know it.
When they had retired to rest, if there was any moon in the night, when they had retired to rest, if there was any moon or the night was starlight, I went into the woods and collected my own food and fuel for the cottage. When I returned, as often as was necessary, I cleared their path from the snow and performed these offices that I had seen done by Felix. I afterward found that these labors, performed by an invisible hand, greatly astonished them, and once or twice I heard them, on these occasions, utter these words, "Good spirit, wonderful." But I did not then understand the signification of these terms. My thoughts now became more active, and I longed to discover the motives and feelings of these lovely creatures. I was inquisitive to know why Felix appeared so miserable and Agatha so sad. I thought, foolish wretch, that it might be in my power to restore happiness to these deserving people. When I slept or was absent, the forms of the venerable blind father, the gentle Agatha, and the excellent Felix flitted before me. I looked upon them as superior beings who would be the arbiters of my future destiny.
He's bonding with them.
I know. I don't
feel like this is going to end well.
I don't either. I formed in my imagination 1,000 pictures of presenting myself to them and their reception of me. I imagined that they would be disgusted until by my gentle demeanor and consolating words, I should first win their favor and afterwards their love. This isn't going well.
Well, yeah, I mean,
this is going to rip my heart out in a minute.
It's actually going well at the moment, but we all know,
These thoughts exhilarated me and led me to apply with fresh ardor to the acquiring the art of the language. My organs were indeed harsh but supple, and although my voice was very unlike the soft music of their tones, yet I pronounced such words as I understand with tolerable ease. It was as the ass of the lapdog, yet surely the gentle ass, whose intentions were affectionate, although his manners were rude, deserved better treatment than blows and execration.
Yeah, I actually don't know that word. That is what the word is.
I don't know that word. The pleasant showers and genial warmth of spring greatly altered the aspect of the earth. Men who before this change seemed to have been hid in caves dispersed themselves and were employed in various arts of cultivation.
Okay, so spring has sprung. He's made it through the winter months. Mm-hmm. He's gotten them past this need for their food and everything. Everything's going better. Mm-hmm. And so everybody's coming out. They're not staying at home as much.
Right.
I feel like he's going to be discovered. What do you think?
Yeah. The birds sang in more cheerful notes, and the leaves began to bud forth on the trees. Happy, happy earth.
Oh, no.
Fit habitation for gods, which so short a time before was bleak, damp, and unwholesome. My spirits were elevated by the enchanting appearance of nature. The past was blotted from my memory. The present was tranquil, and the future gilded by bright rays of hope and anticipations of joy.
Oh, no. That can be nothing but foreshadowing of something bad.
That's the end of chapter 12.
Oh, you got to read the happy chapter.
You get to probably read the unhappy chapter.
Oh, no.
Chapter 13.
Okay. Anybody got any predictions? No spoiler alerts. If you've read it, don't tell us, but
Yeah, just out of curiosity, is there anybody in the chat who has read this?
Oh, Greg.
Dang, Greg.
Nice.
Welcome, sweet springtime. We greet thee in song.
Just a minute ago, he said it sounds like me on a first date.
Dang, Greg. Who are you fighting? Okay.
All right, there wasn't much drinking in that one. I feel like the countenance is going to change.
No, I felt like there were a lot of countenances.
Well, I guess not towards the end.
All right, chapter 13.
I think I'm going to have a more challenging chapter than you. Chapter 13. I now hasten to the more moving part of my story. I shall relate events that impressed me with feelings which, from what I had been, have made me what I am. So it's still the creature.
Yeah. He's still talking.
Spring advanced rapidly. The weather became fine and the skies cloudless. It surprised me that what before was desert and gloomy should now bloom with the most beautiful flowers and verdure. My senses were gratified and refreshed by 1,000 scents of delight and 1,000 sights of beauty. It was on one of these days when my cottagers, he said my cottagers.
My cottagers.
My cottagers.
My friends, my cottagers.
Periodically rested from labor. The old man played on his guitar, and the children listened to him. That I observed the countenance of Felix was melancholy beyond expression. He sighed frequently, and once his father paused in his music, and I conjectured by his manner that he inquired the cause of his son's sorrow. Felix replied in a cheerful accent, and the old man was recommencing his music when someone tapped at the door.
Uh-oh.
Dun, dun, dun. It was a lady on horseback, accompanied by a countryman as a guide. The lady was dressed in a dark suit and covered with a thick black veil. Agatha asked a question, to which the stranger only replied by pronouncing, in a sweet accent, the name of Felix. Her voice was musical, but unlike that of either of my friends. On hearing this word, Felix came up hastily to the lady, who, when she saw him, threw up her veil, and I beheld a countenance of angelic beauty and expression. Her hair of a shining raven black, and curiously braided. Her eyes were dark but gentle, although animated. Her features of irregular proportion, and her complexion wondrously fair, each cheek tinged with a lovely pink.
Wow, she sounds great.
Felix seemed ravished with delight when he saw her. Every trait of sorrow vanished from his face, and it instantly expressed a degree of ecstatic joy of which I could hardly have believed it capable.
Wonder if it's his mom.
Right? His eyes sparkled as his cheek flushed with pleasure, and at that moment I thought him as beautiful as the stranger. Oh, gosh. She appeared affected by different feelings. Wiping a few tears from her lovely eyes, she held out her hand to Felix, who kissed it rapturously and called her, as well as I could distinguish, his sweet Arabian.
What does that mean?
She did not appear to understand him, but smiled. He assisted her to dismount, and dismissing her guide, conducted her into the cottage. Some conversation took place between him and his father, and the young stranger knelt at the old man's feet and would have kissed his hand, but he raised her and embraced her affectionately.
Oh my.
I soon perceived that although the stranger uttered articulate sounds and appeared to have a language of her own, she was neither understood by nor herself understood the cottagers.
So she's got a different language? Mm-hmm. Carrie says, it's Publishers Clearinghouse. Came to tell them they won $1 million. It's Ed McMahon.
Oh, my gosh. They made many signs which I did not comprehend, but I saw that her presence diffused gladness through the cottage, dispelling their sorrow as the sun dissipates the morning mists. How could she have that much of an effect on them if they can't even understand her?
Yeah. Who is she?
Yeah, I'm confused. I guess that's what he meant by sweet Arabian. I mean, I guess she came from a different country.
Maybe.
I don't know. Felix seemed peculiarly happy, and with smiles of delight welcomed his Arabian. Agatha, the ever gentle Agatha, kissed the hands of the lovely stranger, and pointing to her brother, made signs which appeared to me to mean that he had been sorrowful until she came.
Interesting.
Some hours passed thus, while they, by their countenances, expressed joy, the cause of which I did not comprehend. Presently I found, by the frequent recurrence of some sound which the stranger repeated after them, that she was endeavoring to learn their language, and the idea instantly occurred to me that I should make use of the same instructions to the same end.
Oh.
So the cottagers are trying to teach her their language, and so now the creature is going to follow along.
Yeah, so the creature's like, I've been waiting for this. Yeah. I need some hooked on phonics while I'm here. This is great.
Right? And they're like rapturously delighted with this lady, so I guess he figures it's going to make them happy if he can learn the language.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. The stranger learned about 20 words at the first lesson. Most of them, indeed, were those which I had before understood, but I profited by the others.
He's like, I've got this.
Like, I got this. I know some of these words. As night came on, Agatha and the Arabian retired early. When they separated, Felix kissed the hand of the stranger and said, "Good night, sweet Safie."
Sweet Safie?
Safie. How would you say that?
Safie.
Safi?
Safie? Probably Safi.
We'll say Safi. Safie sounds American.
We are American. Sorry.
He sat up much longer, conversing with his father, and by the frequent repetition of her name, I conjectured that their lovely guest was the subject of their conversation. I ardently desired to understand them, and bent every faculty towards that purpose, but found it utterly impossible. So he's trying to get what they're talking about with this new person, but he can't get it. The next morning, Felix went out to his work, and after the usual occupations of Agatha were finished, the Arabian sat at the feet of the old man, and taking his guitar, played some airs so entrancingly beautiful that they at once drew tears of sorrow and delight from my eyes. Now,
he is so sensitive. Oh my God.
I think this is what has really gotten you about the creature. The music is moving him. He doesn't even know the language, but music is so moving to him that
do you know
that
what
he cries.
Have you had the experience, Laura, where you've experienced something for the first time and it just moves you to tears?
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's him every single moment.
Yeah.
And I can't stand it.
She sang, and her voice flowed in a rich cadence, swelling or dying away like a nightingale of the woods. When she had finished, she gave the guitar to Agatha, who at first declined it. She played a simple air, and her voice accompanied it in sweet accents, but unlike the wondrous strain of the stranger. So poor Agatha wasn't as good as
That's okay.
her. The old man appeared enraptured and said some words which Agatha endeavored to explain to Safi, and by which he appeared to wish to express that she bestowed on him the greatest delight by her music. The days now passed as peaceably as before, with the sole alteration that joy had taken place of sadness in the countenances of my friends. That's a double shot. It's plural.
Yeah, Nettie said earlier, is it a double drink when it's plural? Yeah.
Let's see. Sorry.
I see countenances
Yes.
here. I think that's where you were.
Safi was always gay and happy. She and I improved rapidly in the knowledge of language, so that in 2 months I began to comprehend most of the words uttered by my protectors.
Nice.
In the meanwhile, also the black ground was covered with herbage, and the green banks interspersed with innumerable flowers, sweet to the scent and the eyes, stars of pale radiance among the moonlight woods. The sun became warmer, the nights clear and balmy, and my nocturnal rambles were an extreme pleasure to me, although they were considerably shortened by the late setting and early rising of the sun, for I never ventured abroad during daylight, fearful of meeting with the same treatment I had formerly endured in the first village which I entered.
I don't blame him.
Yeah, so he's just roaming around at night.
Yeah.
My days were spent in close attention, that I might more speedily master the language, and I may boast that I improved more rapidly than the Arabian, who understood very little and conversed in broken accents, whilst I comprehended and could imitate almost every word that was spoken. So I guess it's really just kind of, I guess we're supposed to assume that he...
I feel like I need to name him. I mean, I know his name's not Frankenstein, but he's of Frankenstein's. Let's just call him Little Frank.
Little Frank.
Little Frank.
Poor little Frank. Well, he's never named in the book, I don't think.
I
and he's
know.
always called these hideous names.
I know, it's just not fair. Little Frank.
While I improved in speech, I also learned the science of letters as it was taught to the stranger, and this opened before me a wide field for wonder and delight. The book from which Felix instructed Safi was Volney's Ruins of Empires. I should not have understood the purport of this book had not Felix, in reading it, given very minute explanations. Oh, that's like us. He had chosen this work, he said, because the declamatory style was framed in imitation of the Eastern authors. He's so eloquent. Let's see. Through this work, I obtained a cursory knowledge of history and a view of the several empires at present existing in the world. It gave me an insight into the manners, governments, and religions of the different nations of the earth. I heard of the slothful Asiatics, of the stupendous genius and mental activity of the Grecians, of the wars and wonderful virtue of the early Romans, of their subsequent degenerating, of the decline of that mighty empire, of chivalry, Christianity, and kings.
He's taking like World Civ.
Yeah. I heard of the discovery of the American hemisphere and wept with Safi over the hapless fate of its original inhabitants. Wow.
Wow.
These wonderful narrations inspired me with strange feelings. Was man indeed at once so powerful, so virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base? Oh my. He appeared at one time a mere scion of the evil principle, and at another as all that can be conceived as noble and godlike. So he's just talking about all the contrasting ways that people
Greg thinks
act.
that slothful Asiatic sounds racist.
Oh, yeah.
I agree. Couldn't agree more.
We're in 1700 something.
Yeah.
To be a great and virtuous man appeared the highest honor that can befall a sensitive being. To be base and vicious, as many on record have been, appeared the lowest degradation, a condition more abject than that of the blind mole or harmless worm. I'm assuming, the undertone of that is himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. For a long time, I could not conceive how one man could go forth to murder his fellow, or even why there were laws and governments. But when I heard details of vice and bloodshed, my wonder ceased, and I turned away with disgust and loathing.
I've made this argument before. I've made this argument to you. I'm like, if people were just cool, if people were just good, inherently good, you wouldn't have to have rules. Like, I've made the argument with Laura about handicap parking before. I know this is silly, but I've told Laura before, I was like, if people were just cool and didn't park in the first 5 spaces, that wouldn't even be an issue. Why don't people just park back and let older people or people who need those more accessible spaces park there? Why can't people just be inherently good? And it's just not a thing.
It just isn't.
It just isn't. And that's a shame.
It is. I went to a big, was like a non-denominational inspirational speaker. It was like Joyce Meyer. Have you seen her on TV?
I think so.
So there's a big anniversary event in a big stadium, and people were just, I mean, not only did they not sit back, and let the people that needed to get closer up. I mean, they just were like herding over each other, trying to get to the front. Like, who cares?
Wow.
So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. It's a shame. It really is.
Little Frank is really tearing us up.
Little Frank. Yeah.
He's really got us. Karen says Eve ate the apple.
I guess that's it.
Right? Okay. Every conversation of the cottagers now opened new wonders to me. While I listened to the instructions which Felix bestowed upon the Arabian, the strange system of human society was explained to me.
Oh.
How interesting.
Okay.
I heard of the division of property, of immense wealth and squalid poverty, of rank, descent, and noble blood. The words induced me to turn towards myself. I learned that the possessions most esteemed by your fellow creatures were high and unsullied descent united with riches. A man might be respected with only one of these advantages, but without either he was considered, except in very rare instances, as a vagabond and a slave.
A vagabond.
Doomed to waste his powers for the profits of the chosen few. And what was I?
What was I?
Of
Where do
my-
I fit in World Civ class?
Of my creation and creator, I was absolutely ignorant, but I knew that I possessed no money, no friends, no kind of property. So see, he doesn't even know where he came from at this point.
Think about how Victor is feeling. So Victor's just sitting there listening to this story.
Oh, that's true. He's telling this to Victor.
So Victor's just like sitting there and he's probably thinking to myself, not only what have I done, but also why did I just leave him to just run away? Why wasn't I the one who taught him these things?
Right.
Why didn't I take responsibility? Why wasn't I his father? Why didn't I do a better job? And you should have, Victor.
He just ran.
He just ran away from his responsibility. I'm so mad at Victor. I hope that I see him one day. I'm just gonna be like,
I bet
yo.
Jamie's gonna be sorry that she missed this episode,
Yeah.
so that you two could.
She's probably exhausted.
hate
She's
on
been selling
Victor.
the last 3 hours.
Yeah, we've had a break, but she hasn't. I was besides endued with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I was not even of the same nature as man. I was more agile than they,
He's better than man.
and could subsist upon coarser diet. I bore the extremes of heat and cold with less injury to my frame. My stature far exceeded theirs. When I looked around, I saw and heard of none like me. Was I, then, a monster, a blot upon the earth from which all men fled and whom all men disowned?
Why do you think he's so big? Because Victor should have made him from body parts that were accessible. What do you think made him so gigantic?
Maybe he just took the torso of a huge person and
Maybe.
the legs of a huge person,
Maybe.
and it just made him 2 feet taller than anybody else.
Maybe so.
And probably it was, like basketball players are now. I mean, probably back then, people were smaller back then. So
True.
I don't know. I cannot describe to you the agony that these reflections inflicted upon me. I tried to dispel them, but sorrow only increased with knowledge. Oh, that I had forever remained in my native wood, nor known nor felt beyond the sensations of hunger, thirst, and heat. So now he's miserable, like now that he can think and that he knows language and that he's heard all of these things and has all this context. He's miserable. He wishes he had never done that. Of what a strange nature is knowledge. There we go. It clings to the mind when it has once seized on it like a lichen on a rock. I wish sometimes to shake off all thought and feeling, but I learned that there was but one means to overcome the sensation of pain, and that was death, a state which I feared yet did not understand. I admired virtue and good feelings, and loved the gentle manners and amiable qualities of my cottagers, but I was shut out from intercourse with them, except through means which I obtained by stealth, when I was unseen and unknown, and which rather increased than satisfied the desire I had of becoming one among my fellows. So he hasn't appeared to them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The gentle words of Agatha and the animated smiles of the charming Arabian were not for me. The mild exhortations of the old man and the lively conversation of the loved Felix were not for me. Miserable, unhappy wretch.
So now he's just in this place where he's like I do not belong here. And I've learned all these things that make me feel more apart from these people.
Greg says no more blissful ignorance.
Absolutely. Have you ever learned anything and then you're like, oh, God, I wish I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing like being a kid and not knowing how crappy things are. When you're a kid, everything's great. Well, most kids, right? But, wow.
Hi, Renee. Welcome.
Renee, we're glad we found you too.
Okay, we're almost to the end of the chapter. Other lessons were impressed upon me even more deeply. I heard of the difference of sexes and the birth and growth of children, how the father doted on the smiles of the infant and the lively sallies of the older child, how all the life and cares of the mother were wrapped up in the precious charge, how the mind of youth expanded and gained knowledge of brother, sister, and all the various relationships which bind one human being to another in mutual bonds. But where were my friends and relations? No father had watched my infant days.
God in heaven.
No mother had blessed me with smiles and caresses. Or if they had, all my past life was now a blot, a blind vacancy in which I distinguished nothing. From my earliest remembrance, I had been as I then was, in height and proportion. I had never yet seen a being resembling me, or who claimed any intercourse with me. What was I? The question again recurred, to be answered only with groans. I will soon explain to what these feelings, to what this feeling tended, but allow me now to return to the cottagers, whose story excited in me such various feelings of indignation, delight, and wonder, but which all terminated in additional love and reverence for my protectors, for so I loved, in an innocent, half-painful self-deceit, to call them.
Dang.
Like he calls them his protectors, but obviously they're not going to be.
Right. Man, how heartbreaking.
End of chapter. Man, that is bleak.
How heartbreaking. But the hell of it is.
Greg says, don't cry, Mary Beth.
I know. The hell of it is, I feel like empathy, that might not be the right word. Empathy. When you put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Oh, that's very much.
And try to imagine what life is like for some people. So, I mean, he's talking about he doesn't know the love of a mother and father, and there are orphans in the world who don't. And he's talking about how he doesn't feel like he fits the mold and doesn't belong in everyday society. And there are people who feel that way. Right. So, I mean, it's heartbreaking to think about these things. And, it's easy to point fingers and it's easy to say, those people. But you never know what those people are going through.
Exactly.
It's terrible. I feel really bad for him. Little Frank.
Little Frank.
Little Frank. Do you want me to go?
Here, give me little Frank over there.
Here's little Frank.
Poor little Frank. Oh my gosh.
We'll be friends with you, little Frank. Okay, so the little Frank is still speaking.
And
Creature.
Chapter what?
14. The creature is still speaking.
Chapter 14.
Some time elapsed before I learned the history of my friends. It was one which could not fail to impress itself deeply on my mind, unfolding as it did a number of circumstances, each interesting and wonderful to one so utterly inexperienced as I was. The name of the old man was de Lacy. He was descended from a good family in France, where he had lived for many years in affluence, respected by his superiors and beloved by his equals. His son was bred in the service of his country, and Agatha had ranked with ladies on the highest distinction. So all along I've been picturing Agatha younger, but they're older.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and we were picturing him too young, I think, because I guess so Felix, I mean, evidently the Arabian is his girlfriend, right?
I guess so. So they're older than I anticipated,
and
I guess that's my bad.
And they did have they were, affluent. They did have a lot of money. Is that what that said?
So when they were talking about them going out and doing work, I was expecting like little kids going out and doing chores, but no, I think they're older. So that was my bad.
Yeah.
A few months before my arrival, they had lived in a large and luxurious city called Paris, surrounded by friends and possessed of every enjoyment with virtue, refinement of intellect or taste, accompanied by a moderate fortune.
Well, how are they cottagers now?
I don't know.
Oh, dear.
The father of Safi had been the cause of their ruin.
Oh. That's
I'll say that again.
Oh, the
father
Arabian.
The father of Safi, the Arabian, had been the cause of their ruin. He was a Turkish merchant and had inhabited Paris for many years when for some reason, which I could not learn, he became obnoxious to the government.
Carrie said Ponzi schemes.
Yep, there you go. He had become obnoxious to the government. He was seized and cast into prison the very day that Safi arrived from Constantinople to join him. He was tried and condemned to death. The injustice of his sentence was very flagrant. All Paris was indignant, and it was judged that his religion and wealth, rather than the crime alleged against him, had been the cause of his condemnation. So he's in Turkey, and his religion was the cause of his condemnation. This is the 1800s? 1700s? Okay.
Or earlier. I mean, the book is written in the like Victor is at the end is in the 1700s. So, yeah, so probably mid 1700s, I guess, is what they're talking about.
Felix had accidentally been present at the trial.
Greg says the French Revolution, maybe?
Maybe. Felix had accidentally been present at the trial. His horror and indignation were uncontrollable when he heard the decision of the court. He made at that moment a solemn vow to deliver him, and then looked around for the means. After many...
So do you think... Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm just trying to catch up. Do you think that this is Felix's dad? So do you think Felix and Safi are brother and sister?
I don't think so.
I don't know. I don't know what's happening.
So.
I guess you're just going to have to keep reading. I'll let you read for a bit.
After many fruitless attempts to gain admittance into the prison, he found a strongly gated window in an unguarded part of the building, which lighted the dungeon of the unfortunate... I don't know this word.
Mahometan?
Mahometan?
I don't know.
Of the unfortunate Mahometan.
I mean, it's capitalized like that's
look that up.
Like that's a religion or a race of people.
Yeah, I apologize to all of you for not knowing that. I just don't know that. Which lighted the dungeon of the unfortunate Mahometan. Okay. Who, loaded with chains, waited in despair the execution of the barbarous sentence. Felix visited the grate at night and made known to the prisoner his intentions in his favor.
Oh, it's just a different spelling. They're talking about Muhammad, so they're talking about Islamic.
Okay, got it. Thank you for looking that up.
You're welcome. It's just spelled different than we spell it now in this book.
Got it. The Turk, amazed and delighted, endeavored to kindle the zeal of his deliverer by promises of reward and wealth. Felix rejected his offers with contempt. Yet when he saw the lovely Safi, who was allowed to visit her father, and who by her gestures expressed her lively gratitude, the youth could not help owning to his own mind that the captive possessed a treasure which would fully reward his toil and hazard. So I'm thinking that Felix and Safi are a thing. And Safi's dad is being persecuted for being Islamic. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
The Turk quickly perceived the impression that his daughter had made on the heart of Felix and endeavored to secure him more entirely in his interests by the promise of her hand in marriage, so soon as she should be conveyed to a place of safety. Felix was too delicate to accept his offer, yet he looked forward to the probability of the event as to the consummation of his happiness. So yeah, they're a thing.
Linda, I'm sorry. We're going to try to do better with. We just did it at the last minute, and I think people didn't get their notifications.
Correct.
So I'm
sorry about that, Linda. During the ensuing days, while the preparations were going forward for the escape of the merchant, the zeal of Felix was warmed by several letters that he received from this lovely girl, who found means to express her thoughts in the language of her lover, by the aid of an old man, a servant of her father who understood French. She thanked him in the most ardent terms for his intended services toward her parent, and at the same time she gently deplored her own fate. I have copies of these letters, for I found means during my residence in the hovel to procure the implements of writing.
Oh.
And the letters were often in the hands of Felix or Agatha. Before I depart, I will give them to you. They will prove the truth of my tale, but at present, as the sun is already far declined, I shall have time to repeat the substance of them to you.
Okay, so he's telling Victor, look, I got proof.
Yeah.
This is how it went down.
Sophie related that her mother was a Christian Arab, seized and made a slave by the Turks. Recommended by her beauty, she had won the heart of the father of Sophie, who married her. The young girl spoke in high and enthusiastic terms of her mother, who, born in freedom, spurned the bondage to which she was now reduced. She instructed her daughter to the tenets of her religion and taught her to aspire to higher powers of intellect and independence of spirit forbidden to the female followers of Muhammad. This lady died, but her lessons were impressed on the mind of Sophie, who sickened at the prospect of again returning to Asia and being immured within the halls of harem, allowing only to occupy herself with infantile amusements, ill-suited to the temper of her soul, now accustomed to grand ideas and a noble emulation of virtue.
Goodness. Ill-suited to the what? Say that again.
Ill-suited to the temper of her soul.
The temper of her soul.
Now accustomed to grand ideas and a noble emulation of virtue.
Wow.
The prospect of marrying a Christian and remaining in a country where women were allowed to take a rank in society was enchanting to her. So not only is he trying to learn a language and learn about other things, now he has to learn about religion and how that falls into things. Talk about difficult. He's getting a well-rounded education.
Yeah. I mean, he is really...
Yeah.
He is really doing...
He's gotten more than he bargained for.
He picked the right hovel.
Yeah, he did. If he was going to go to any hovel, he picked the right one. The day for the execution of the Turk was fixed, but on the night previous to it, he quitted his prison, and before morning was distant many leagues from Paris. Felix had procured passports, in the name of his father, sister, and himself. He had previously communicated his plan to the former, who aided the deceit by quitting his house under the pretense of a journey and concealing himself with his daughter in an obscure part of Paris. So they're fleeing.
Yeah, this is a lot of detail.
They're getting out of Dodge, man.
This is a lot of detail for the creature to be giving Victor.
I agree. Felix conducted the fugitives through France to Lyons and across Mont Cenis to Leghorn, where the merchant had decided to wait a favorable opportunity of passing into some part of the Turkish dominions. Sophie resolved to remain with her father until the moment of his departure, before which time the Turk renewed his promise that he should be united to his deliverer, and Felix remained with them in expectation of that event. And in the meantime, he enjoyed the society of the Arabian, who exhibited toward him the simplest and tenderest affection. They conversed with one another through the means of an interpreter, and sometimes with the interpretation of looks, and Sophie sang to him the divine airs of her native country.
Oh, yeah.
So they're doing their best.
Yeah. Sophie's a little singer.
They're just making eyes at each other.
Yeah.
Body language. That does a lot, right?
Yeah. Do you want me to read?
Am I not doing a good job?
No, you're doing a great job.
I can.
You're doing a great job.
I'll stop if you want me to. My boss lived in Turkey and graduated
Really?
high school in Turkey.
Really?
Yeah. Did you know that?
No, that's fascinating,
Right?
actually.
I know. The Turk allowed this intimacy to take place and encouraged the hopes of the youthful lovers, while in his heart he had formed far other plans. He loathed.
So who's the youthful lovers?
Felix and Sophie. Yeah. He loathed, this is the Turk now, he loathed the idea that his daughter should be united to a Christian, but he feared the resentment of Felix if he should appear lukewarm, for he knew he was still in the power of his deliverer if he should choose to betray him to the Italian state which they were inhabited. He resolved 1,000 plans by which he should be enabled to prolong the deceit until it might no longer be necessary, and secretly to take his daughter with him when he departed. His plans were facilitated by the news which arrived from Paris. I feel like this is an odd side story.
It's very odd.
The government of France were greatly enraged at the escape of their victim, and spared no pains to detect and punish his deliverer. The plot of Felix was quickly discovered, and De Lacy and Agatha were thrown into prison.
Oh, no.
The dad and the sister. Felix's dad.
Felix's dad and sister. The cottagers.
Yeah, the cottagers, the friends.
So
were thrown into prison.
this is previous to the cottage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're learning how they came to be in the cottage.
Yeah.
The news reached, well, no wonder they're probably so hungry, is they probably don't know how to fend for themselves. They probably don't really know how to farm.
Oh, right, because they were wealthy before.
Right.
Yeah.
The news reached Felix and roused him from his dream of pleasure. His blind and aged father and his gentle sister lay in a dungeon while he enjoyed the free air and the society of her whom he loved. This idea was torture to him. He quickly arranged with the Turk that if the latter should find a favorable opportunity for escape before Felix could return to Italy, Sophie should remain as a boarder at the convent at Leghorn. And then quitted the lovely Arabian. He hastened to Paris and delivered himself up to the vengeance of the law, hoping to free De Lacy and Agatha by this proceeding. So he's left Sophie to go free his family.
Yeah. Delbert says there wasn't a Domino's pizza around the corner back then.
True. Very true.
So so that's how they got split up. He had to leave Sophie, try to get them out of jail.
He did not succeed.
Oh.
They remained confined for 5 months before the trial took place, the result of which deprived them of their fortune and condemned them to a perpetual exile from their native country.
Greg is just sharing with us that he was reading Mary Shelley's bio, which we've read a little of, but he said a political persecution had a major impact on her own family, so she's probably venting here.
Oh, I bet you're right, Greg.
So that's why it's a weird side story, but she's like, I'm going to get this in here.
Absolutely. They found a miserable asylum in the cottage in Germany, where I discovered them. Felix, so they're like out of their country. They have been exiled. So they found a miserable asylum in the cottage in Germany, where I discovered them. Felix soon learned that the treacherous Turk, for whom he and his family endured such unheard of oppression, on discovering that his deliverer was thus reduced to poverty and ruin, became a traitor to good feeling and honor that had quitted Italy with his daughter, insultingly sending Felix a pittance of money to aid him, as he said, in some plan of future maintenance. So this is why they're always so sad. You know, when the creature, when little Frank found them, he was always like, why are they so sad all the time? They are just really down. Well, no wonder. Such were the events that preyed on the heart of Felix and rendered him, when I first saw him, the most miserable of his family. He could have endured poverty, and while this distress had been the meat of his virtue, he gloried in it. But the ingratitude of the Turk and the loss of his beloved Safi were misfortunes more bitter and irreparable. The arrival of the Arabian now infused new life into his soul. When the news reached Leghorn that Felix was deprived of his wealth and rank, the merchant commanded his daughter to think no more of her lover, but to prepare to return her to her native country. The generous nature of Safi was outraged by this command. She attempted to expostulate with her father, but he left her angrily, reiterating his tyrannical mandate.
Ooh.
A few days later, the Turk entered his daughter's apartment and told her hastily that he had reason to believe that his residence in Leghorn had been divulged and that he should speedily be delivered up to the French government. He had consequently hired a vessel to convey him to Constantinople, for which the city he should sail in a few hours. He intended to leave his daughter under the care of a confidential servant, to follow her at a leisure with the greater part of his property, which had not yet arrived at Leghorn. When alone, Safi resolved her own mind the plan of conduct that it would become her to pursue in this emergency. A residence in Turkey was abhorrent to her. Her religion and her feelings were alike adverse to it. By some papers of her father which fell into her hands, she heard of the exile of her lover and learnt the name of the spot where he then resided. She hesitated some time, but at length she formed her determination. Taking with her some jewels that belonged to her and a sum of money, she quitted Italy with an attendant, a native of Leghorn who understood the common language of Turkey, and departed for Germany. She arrived in safety at a town about 20 leagues from the cottage of De Lacy, when her attendant fell dangerously ill. Safi nursed her with the most devoted affection, but the poor girl died, and the Arabian was left alone, unacquainted with the language and the country, and utterly ignorant of the customs of the world. She fell, however, in good hands. The Italian had mentioned the name of the spot for which they were bound, and after her death, the woman of the house in which they had lived took care that Safi should arrive safely at the cottage of her lover. So there you go. That's the end of the chapter.
Wow.
So here we have Felix, and now we know what's happening, why he's so sad, because he was exiled from his country. Well, first of all, he left his lover to go free his dad and his sister from prison. And then they got exiled. They're like, get out of here. And then Safi's just hanging out with her dad, and she's just like, oh, I hate this. And then her dad's like, let's leave. And he goes first. And she's like, hell with that. I'm not doing it. And so she formulates her own plan. She's like, I'm going to Germany. I don't speak the language. I don't know anything about it, but I'm out of here. Peace.
Yeah.
Her dad's going to be pissed.
Yeah. I don't imagine that went well.
No.
Hello, El Unicorn.
El Unico.
El Unico.
Say it right.
I always want to say unicorn.
Okay, so that
Greg
was good.
says in some books this backstory would be called a slog.
A slog, yes.
So it's quite the backstory. I mean, it's totally off point.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, why do we care why these people are the way they are?
Well,
these cottagers.
It's probably going to matter. I assume that maybe the Turk is going to come looking for her, because the Turk probably knows where they are.
Maybe.
Because if the papers fell into her hands where they were, then he already probably knows. So he's probably going to come looking for her. It's probably going to be a disaster.
Do we have to stop now? I want to know what happens.
We have to stop. We've been on for an hour.
Oh, okay.
So you'll have to come back next Saturday.
We have to make these manageable pieces.
Yeah. And if you have the book at home, you can read along with us. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're out there listening in podcast land on your favorite podcast app, welcome. We're really glad that you're here. Tales from the Put Out Closet. We would love for you to come over to YouTube and watch us live on Saturdays. We've been trying to schedule them earlier in the morning. Today was an off day. We had a sale earlier today, and then I had to go out of town for a little while. But as soon as I got back, we did it. So if you're subscribed to us, make sure you hit that notification bell, although sometimes it appears that it doesn't work correctly, but maybe hit it anyway. It'll be fun.
Good. People are saying that they were glad they made it, that are in the chat.
And
so.
if you're just joining us for the first episode, this is the 7th episode of Frankenstein. You could go back and listen to the rest of it, and then you'll be all caught up.
Or you can go back and listen to some summaries. Like they have some on YouTube, kind of like the... what do you call it? The Cliff Notes?
Yeah.
And then get caught up and finish with us. So, yeah.
So those of you listening on your favorite podcast app, please give us a follow there. Those of you who are watching and listening on YouTube, if you are not subscribed to our channel already, it would be awesome if you would do that. It's free and it helps our channel grow. Make sure you give us a thumbs up. If you're watching after this video is live, after it posts, leave us a comment below and let us know how you're liking the podcast so far and what you want us to do after Frankenstein is over.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your weekend. Do something fun. Have a great night. And as always, make sure you stay tuned to see what Fatbird finds next. And we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.